CBS News presents Douglas Edwards with up-to-the-minute developments from all parts of the world. Mr. Edwards.
Good evening, everybody. Leading the news tonight, it's Washington all the way. The opening of Congress, the indictment for perjury of a former White House intimate.
Olds brings the news. Your local Oldsmobile dealer, the dealer who brings you famous rocket engine Oldsmobiles, presents an up-to-the-minute account of today's headline news, reported by television's foremost news commentator, Douglas Edwards.
And a very good evening, everybody, coast to coast. Tonight, a swelling protest on the handling of the Koji prison incident and two generals on a higher-ranking carpet for sure.
Good evening, everybody.
Coast to coast, Douglas Edwards reporting.
Douglas Edwards anchored.
Good evening, everybody. Coast to coast, Douglas Edwards reporting. At Cape Canaveral, a dull thud heard round the world.
Good evening from the CBS News Control Center in New York. This is Walter Cronkite reporting.
This is the evening edition of CBS News with Walter Cronkite.
Good evening from CBS News headquarters in New York. This is Walter Cronkite with the CBS Evening News. John Fitzgerald Kennedy was assassinated today in the 46th year of his life and his third year as President of the United States.
Direct from CBS News election headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
Good evening from our CBS News election headquarters in New York.
Direct from our newsroom in Washington, in color, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Russ Hodge in Memphis, Tennessee, and Bert Quint in Quezon, South Vietnam.
Good evening. Dr. Martin Luther King, the apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee.
Direct from CBS News Convention Headquarters in Miami Beach, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Charles Kuralt in the CBS Newsroom in New York, Eric Severide in Miami Beach, and Daniel Shore in Washington.
Good evening. The deep split between moderates and conservatives that marked the last Republican convention.
From CBS Election Headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Charles Kuralt in the CBS Newsroom, Bernard Kalb in San Clemente, and Bruce Hall in Miami.
Good evening. This was the day that comes every 4 years when the...
From CBS News Headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Robert Barr in Kansas City, Missouri, Ike Pappas in Independence, Missouri, Charles Kuralt in Independence, Neil Strasser in Washington, and George Nathanson in Managua, Nicaragua.
Good evening. Former President Harry S. Truman died this morning at age 88.
From CBS News Headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather substituting for Walter Cronkite, and in Washington, Ike Pappas and Roy Caron in Marshalltown, Iowa.
Good evening. A quarter century of American involvement in South Vietnam is over.
This is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. President Carter delivers a special address to the United Nations this evening.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather and a special report on federal judges tonight in trouble with the law.
Good evening. Both sides played hard and tough today in the air controller strike. Good evening. This is the CBS Evening News, Dan Rather reporting. Overall, consumer prices are down for the first time in 17 years.
For President-elect George Bush, the picture of the triumph of today and transition at the White House to come. And words of encouragement from President Reagan.
Today, my hope is this. You ain't seen nothing yet.
This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. The day after Election Day, President-elect George Bush moved quickly today to smooth the transition from the Reagan-Bush administration to the Bush-Quayle administration.
Germany and the Soviet Union strike a historic deal. Hundreds dead or trapped in an earthquake in the Philippines. And President Bush puts the budget deficit at $168 billion.
This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. The new unified and wealthier Germany today struck a deal with the Soviet Union.
That although change is on the horizon, we understand the need to pursue stability even as we pursue new growth.
The day after, a new president-elect, new hope, and the promise of change. We'll have a complete report. In the U.S. Senate, lots of new faces, including a record number of women. And a look ahead to the new Washington. You'll find out what's hot and what's not. This is the CBS Evening News. Good evening, Dan Rather reporting. In just 11 weeks, the presidency of the United States will change hands.
Secondhand cigarette smoke. Will Congress pass a law to crack down on smokers?
A second crest and maybe a third. The Mississippi River continues to rampage through an exhausted Midwest.
And an Eye on America investigation. Tonight, from miracle to nightmare. Communicating the truth or something else.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather and Connie Chung.
Good evening. The federal government today made several aggressive moves against secondhand tobacco smoke. A strong Senate attack on President Clinton's Bosnia policy as a new wave of ethnic cleansing begins. New independent testing finds some child safety seats downright dangerous. And a magic potion that burns off fat. The wait may soon be over.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
Good evening. The Senate has voted to end an embargo that's keeping arms away from Bosnia's outgunned army. Arkansas and Tennessee take the latest hits, one of them in downtown Nashville. Paula Jones confirms she will appeal the federal court ruling that threw out her civil lawsuit against the president. And on our 50th anniversary, a look back as the torch is passed in Washington and here on the CBS Evening News.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. There is tornado terror tonight in Nashville, Tennessee. The crime of the new century. High-tech criminals shut down more internet sites and shake up Wall Street. We'll take you inside a secret bunker that shields web providers from cyber terror. A key piece of evidence is recovered in the Alaska Airlines crash. And a long, dry winter in the heartland could mean higher food bills for you.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. Imagine hundreds of cars are hijacked at once. He gunned down his teacher. Today, a child gets the adult verdict.
Count one, we find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder with a firearm.
On the day mass murderer McVeigh was to die, the FBI director says still more misplaced evidence has turned up. The Bush energy plan. It's out officially tomorrow, already taking heavy fire today. And Eye on America. The risk of giving powerful adult drugs to children. CBS News investigates.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. There is a verdict tonight in a Florida murder case that drew national attention to a controversial trend in criminal justice.
Tonight's headlines: Saddam speaks, pleading for resistance as the noose tightens. U.S. forces smash more Republican Guard units. Baghdad airport capture leads to new threats from Iraqis. Also tonight, U.S. Marines fighting heat and exhaustion get a boost with their first letters from home. The SARS alert. The U.S. prepares quarantines as scientists search for the source of the mysterious disease. And images of a war fought in front of our eyes. As hope grows, the decisive battle is near.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. U.S. forces tightened their hold today around Saddam Hussein's capital.
I'm Bob Schieffer. The security of the free world depends on an American victory in Iraq. That's what President Bush said today, and that's where we'll start tonight. Then we'll have these stories.
In the fight against global warming, California goes its own way, legislating a big cut in greenhouse gas emissions. I'm John Blackstone.
I'm Dr. John LaPook on how researchers are finding new ways to boost the body's own defenses to fight cancer.
And it's Bob's last night in the anchor chair. For my first story at CBS, I'll take a look back at his remarkable career.
You want me to tell you a secret? I've really enjoyed it.
This is the CBS Evening News with Bob Schieffer.
Good evening. Well, tonight does mark my last night at this desk, and we'll have more on that later in the broadcast.
I'm Katie Couric. Tonight, it was the first front in the war on terror. And in Afghanistan now, the Taliban are back with a vengeance. Lara Logan has an unprecedented encounter with al-Qaeda's best friends. And in something we're calling snapshots, Vanity Fair has the baby picture everyone has been waiting for. And tonight, so do we.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be with you tonight. For many Americans today, it was back to work and back to school. I'm Katie Couric. Tonight, a rebuke from Congress to President Bush.
A motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
The Democratic-controlled House goes on record against his troop buildup, but how far will it go to try to stop it? And some of the biggest sacrifices of the Iraq War are carried on the smallest of shoulders.
It's nice knowing that some other people's dads are over there, so you're not like the only one.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Hello, everyone. The words were simple and clear after 4 days of debate. Tonight, one last push for votes, working the phones.
We're going to win this election.
Now it's up to the voters. Campaign 08 is finally over. I'm Katie Couric. History is being made this election day. That may include the biggest turnout of voters the country has ever seen. And instant replay, the highlights and lowlights of the longest presidential campaign in U.S. history.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric reporting tonight from CBS News election headquarters in New York.
And good evening, everyone, on this very historic night. Tonight, it's a battle for every last vote to get health care reform through the Senate by Christmas recess. And his could be the last. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, health care winners and losers. The entire health industry stands to make a fortune, but people and politicians who wanted a public option probably won't get one. And recognize this man? He's being honored with the largest mountain sculpture in the world.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. It's a race against time now to get at least some version of health care reform through the Senate before Congress leaves town for Christmas.
Tonight, one of the women accusing Herman Cain of sexual harassment says it happened more than once.
She made a complaint in good faith about a series of inappropriate behaviors and unwanted advances from the CEO.
Jan Crawford has the breaking news. Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords reveals what she remembers of the shooting and her reaction to learning that others had died. Lee Cowan has her story. New unemployment numbers are out today. Anthony Mason tells us what they say about where the economy is headed now. And On the Road with Steve Hartman. Tonight, proof that an elephant never forgets.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley.
Good evening. With Herman Cain essentially tied for the lead in the Republican presidential contest, we've been following late-breaking developments. An ISIS hit list names American servicemen and women. The Pentagon asked police to protect them. Also tonight, that alleged gang rape at UVA. The police announced the findings of their investigation. CBS News investigates fires in a popular SUV.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley.
ISIS is taking its war of terror to the American homeland, or trying to. Clinton's dire warning about Trump.
This is not someone who should ever have the nuclear codes, because it's not hard to imagine Donald Trump leading us into a war just because somebody got under his very thin skin.
And words of wisdom for the class of 16.
Life is like the Star Wars movies. Some of it is great, some of it sucks, but you have no choice but to sit through all of it.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley.
This is our Western edition. It was an extraordinary moment today.
Breaking news. Otto Warmbier, the American student who returned from North Korea in a coma, died today.
There's no excuse for the way the North Koreans treated our son.
It's a brutal regime.
And celebrating an American hero.
What's it like to be a direct descendant of Harriet Tubman?
It's really exciting. It's awesome.
Awesome.
This is the CBS Evening News.
Good evening, I'm Anthony Mason. We begin with the heartbreaking story of Otto Warmbier.
I just don't know what the hell to say.
The political upset of the year.
I would have liked to have had the seat.
The majority of the voters in my state chose principle over politics.
Things are looking good for us.
And
guess who's coming to dinner?
Guess who's entering the National Film Registry?
Who?
Die Hard fans.
Do you really think you have a chance against us, Mr. Cowboy?
Yippee-ki-yay.
Have reason to celebrate.
Goonies never say die!
This is the CBS Evening News with Jeff Glor.
And good evening. It is the Alabama election with an impact across the country. On this Monday night, the death toll is rising rapidly from an erupting volcano in Central America and the breakthrough treatment for breast cancer that saved this woman's life. But first, a look at tonight's headlines in 60 seconds.
A volcanic eruption from Guatemala's Fuego volcano killed dozens of people on Sunday.
Rescuers are working to pull people from the rock.
Also, the remarkable group of Gold Star kids helping others through their pain.
Does Corbin help make you less sad?
Yes.
Good evening. On this Monday night, we are going to begin with a disaster unfolding in Guatemala.
On the CBS Evening News this Monday, Wall Street has its worst day in months as China hits back by raising its tariffs on the U.S. But the president says we're right where we want to be.
We're in a very good position, and I think it's only going to get better.
As a consumer out there, what are we paying more for?
There are thousands of items on this list. Everyone better be making more money because these things...
Good evening, I'm John Dickerson. As tensions grew today in the U.S.-China trade war, consumers and investors found themselves caught in the middle.
Tonight, the president denies his tweets are racist, even as he steps up his attacks on 4 congresswomen of color.
If you hate our country, if you're not happy here, you can leave.
And the women fire back.
He's launching a blatantly racist attack.
The women who helped put men on the moon.
My husband looked at me and he said, honey, you're going to be in the history books.
And why New Yorkers are being warned more blackouts could be coming this summer.
This is the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
Good evening. It's good to be with you. We begin with breaking news in Washington. Tonight, President Biden signs his COVID relief bill into law, 1 year since the coronavirus was declared a pandemic, and the world as we knew it changed. President Biden addresses the nation, his first in prime time, his vision for the path forward and bringing an end to the pandemic. The former presidents unite.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
So roll up your sleeve and do your part.
This is our shot.
Their message for the nation.
This is the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell, reporting from the nation's capital.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. There have been few years in American history more consequential, more life-changing. Tonight, the big change is coming to Congress as Nancy Pelosi, the first woman to be elected Speaker of the House, announces she'll step aside. Plus, the history-making lawmaker who could succeed her.
When I came to the Congress in 1987, there were 12 Democratic women. Now there are over 90, and we want more.
For years, the most powerful woman in Washington. Tonight, the end of an era. And Eye on America, how climate change is turning Alaska into America's fastest growing farmland.
Is the last frontier the new frontier for farming in America?
This is the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell, reporting from the nation's capital.
Good evening to our viewers in the West, and thank you for joining us on this Thursday night. Well, tonight, the political landscape here in Washington is on the verge of big change. Tonight, the new questions after U.S. fighter jets shoot down 3 high-flying objects in 3 days. Here are tonight's top headlines. The new images of the Chinese spy balloon as the White House assembles a UFO task force to find out what the other objects are.
I don't think the American people need to worry about aliens with respect to these craft.
Growing anger in Turkey, blaming developers for the rising death toll.
Around 100.
When the sunshine will shine together, don't you I'll be here forever.
And the Kansas City Chiefs have won Super Bowl 57.
How about those Chiefs?
Good evening, and thank you for joining us as we begin a new week together. Tonight, we're also beginning our new Heart Health series. Bracing for mudslides, the concern tonight as a battered Southern California prepares for its first rainfall in months.
My brother just lost his home over in the Altadena fire, and now I'm like, oh my God, now it's my turn.
2 key Republican senators say they won't vote for President Trump's pick for the Pentagon. What does it mean for Pete Hegseth's nomination?
Every senator is going to vote their conscience.
And tariffs threat.
We're going to be demanding respect from other nations.
How soon could import taxes be put in place? What does it mean if you're trying to buy a car?
How quickly does that get passed on to the consumer?
It's immediate.
The CBS Evening News starts now. Good evening, I'm Norah O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us. New wildfires have erupted in Southern California.
From CBS News headquarters in New York,
This is the CBS Evening News.
President Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration moves here to America's biggest city. Good evening from New York. I'm John Dickerson.
I'm Maurice Dubois.